Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Ultimate Coach podcast, a companion to the transformative book, The Ultimate Coach, written by Amy Hardison and Alan D. Thompson. Each conversation is designed to be a powerful wake-up call, reminding us of what's possible for you in your life. So if you're on a journey to expand your state of being, this podcast is for you. Welcome back. My name's Philippe Bartu, one of the three hosts of the podcast, and today I'm being joined by Dominic London. Dominic, good to have you here. Hello. Dominic, we've had a few conversations, and I'm just so inspired by who you are and so excited to bring you on as a guest today. Every so often, I'll meet someone who has just an extraordinary story and whose life was really going in a very clear direction of, how could I say it? From what I know of, you were going in a direction of probably abusive substances and getting arrested, and a life of being in a lot of hardship and crime and poverty. And you're today a successful high-performance coach. You lead a community, you have multiple businesses, and a beautiful family of three with three children. Dominic, your story has deeply touched me. And although we don't have time to unpack the whole thing, I would like just to start just from you to just introduce yourself into this group, and for the people who don't know you, a little bit about your background and where you are now.
Thank you for that introduction. I was feeling into that and I was thinking, sounds like an extraordinary guy. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. And we have had a few discussions that have been a blessing to my life as always. So who am I? My name is Dominic London, 37 years old, married to my wonderful wife, Jane London, 13 years married together this will be our second decade together, I believe, this year. And I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I am also a coach. And I love the life that I have. I've currently created. And like you said, to speak a little bit to kind of the journey, and I'll keep it as short as I can. It started out real bleak for me, coming from a socioeconomically deprived background with drug-addicted parents, to my own drug addiction and alcohol abuse in my teenage years, to actually, looking at 15 years behind bars. And that led to a traumatic mental breakdown. But that traumatic experience was and has been the catalyst for the most transformational journey of a lifetime that I've been on from then to now and continue to be on. So,
yeah, just for people who don't know you, and I only found out about this recently, that your father had been in prison, and so that you just started out by discovering some books. And just what was the very first book that you picked up that opened your mind to a new life that would be possible for you?
Oh, that's a good question. And in actual fact, not one book pops into my mind. There was a multiple number of books. And as I sat with that, as that kind of like was projected onto the desktop of my mind, a book that was present for me now that really kind of got me intrigued was actually a book by Brendon Burchard called Life's Golden Ticket. When I first started out in this journey.
How old were you when you picked up that book?
Oh, that's a good question. I couldn't give you an accurate age, but it would have been at least, a decade ago. So,
and I know you went on to do a lot of work with Brendon, and you lead a community which is really about high performance based on a lot of his teachings. Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did. So Brendon was one of those guys that kind of popped up on my radar in this this personal development space as a certified high performance coach. multiple New York Times bestselling author, featured on Oprah and Success Magazine. He was like really, but how I found Brendan or stumbled across Brendan was in my search on YouTube, like just searching how to deal with depression. Because at that time, I was probably a good few years out of my breakdown, but I was still suffering with, agoraphobia and panic attacks and just real deep depression. So, I turned to the internet like we will do. And Brendan was one of those guys that popped up in a video. And what struck me about Brendan was his energy.
Yeah.
Kind of like intrigued and kind of started following him from there. And then went on to eventually, when I was looking at a qualification in the coaching industry and explored all of the ones available. I did a bit of neurolinguistic programming and CBT as well, cognitive behavior therapy. And I was looking at the different avenues to go down. And Brendan's just stood out to me as one that, resonated with me and where I was at that time. And so I invested. That was one of my first big investments. That was $10,000 for the qualification. Yeah, I've never looked back. So it heavily influenced me in regards to, and on my journey to, unlocking my infinite potential.
Well, I'm so proud to just for how far you've come from where you are now. The fact that we're having this conversation today also means that, you've been very much involved in bringing being into the world. And you're also a speaker in Birmingham. You'll be sharing the stage with some wonderful people. We'll be talking about that. We can talk about that a little later on. What I would love to hear from you, though, is I also know that you've kind of, I remember saying, you kind of stepped back a little from the being community and felt a little disconnected from it. And in a way, I just really appreciate the honesty and the authenticity that you brought in that conversation. And just wanted to get a bit more into understanding how does being fit into all this in your journey?
Yeah. So how does being fit into all of this in my journey? So I think for me, it's more my pursuit to find the best in the industry at what they do. So back in 2018, when 2017, when I actually realized that coaching was a profession, I kind of worked through a lot of fears and ideas I had around what coaching was and started hiring coaches for myself. When I made that decision and I sat down with my wife and I said, I think this is something that I'm going to pursue. And she kind of gave me the, oh boy, okay, but you got my blessing sort of thing. I started hiring coaches. I started hiring high performance coaches that were part of my original certification in community of alumni. And then I started expanding outside of that. And one of the guys I hired was a guy called Michael Serwa. And I remember sitting with Michael, and I remember Michael kept talking about his coach, Steve Hardison. And at that moment in time, based on who I was being, which is almost, when I look back at it, I'm like, wow, like how far you've come. But even in that coaching session with him, all I was thinking at that time was, why am I sitting with you? Like, why am I here with you? If the guy that's the main guy that you're going to is like, that's what I'm in search of, the best. Who's at the top of this mountain that I can spend time with, I can learn from, I can be with. And so it was early 2018 is when even the name Steve Hardison came into my awareness. And it was my pursuit of, being around the best and learning from the best, being coached by the best that got me curious about Steve. Yeah, as I got to know who Steve was, I was introduced to this idea and this concept of being.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing there is just this unwavering pursuit of excellence, being a professional coach in developing and learning. How did you make that happen? From like, what actually happened then? You at some point you decided, this is it. I want to learn from the best, and I want to learn from Steve.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it goes way back to, being homeless when my first son was born 16 years ago, and really like this in a moment of despair, thinking, how am I gonna? And I know I'm born. I know I was born and put on this earth to to create a positive impact, to make a positive change. I've always known that no matter what I've done in my life or where I've been, I've always felt this compelling force that's like, you are called, your life is special. And so, when I was trying to even succeed in my business of like plumbing and construction, I struggled for the first 7-8 years. It was hard work. It drove my marriage apart. I was addicted to working. And then I kind of realized, or it came to my awareness. In fact, it was a guy that I'll reference him. I've never, ever done anything with him. I've never bought a course of his. I don't really know what he's about, but it was this ad that popped up on Facebook, and it was a guy called Ty Lopez. And he said, he was giving this talk, and he said, if working hard, was the key to success, then every construction worker, every cleaner, every, manual labor individual would be a roaring success. And I don't know what it was, but at that moment in time, that message hit me. And I was like, okay, so Dom, working hard alone isn't going to be enough. And anyway, I started pursuing, mentorship and coaching at that time as well. And I realized from the growth I had experienced in my previous business that what truly accelerated me and got me to that level of like financial success I was aspiring to at that time was being around the best people, being in masterminds, up leveling my network, whether that be, paid or unpaid. So when I started exploring this idea of coaching, it was fueled by real life experience of the power of being around the best and getting around the best. And so that's where that motivation came from. It was alive in me based on the experience I'd already had in my other business. And I figured if I am going to shorten however long this journey is going to be between me just deciding to be a coach and becoming recognized as, one of the world's best, which isn't even something that I'm connected to anymore from that place. So I want to be known as the best. But at that place when I was being motivated, for me, it was very logical, and it made sense that I need to seek the best out because I've experienced the power of that already. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, where that desire was born from an experience of reaping the rewards of exercising a discipline like that in my previous business.
And I can really also see there's a real power in that commitment that you made to yourself, in who you wanted yourself, how you saw yourself, and you really stuck through it. So, I acknowledge you for that, because I know it takes something to go to get to where you are today and everything you've been through. I also want to share a short story about how you appeared in my awareness. And this is, I think not many people may know this. So I want to share this because it really speaks to who you are to me. I was in London, and I had just come for the ultimate experience in London. And I was sharing an Airbnb with Casey and Rebecca Holt. And it was the day before the event. And Casey said, it's a miracle that I'm here. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, someone gifted me a ticket. Someone paid for my flight to come here. Someone that I'd never really had a conversation with, and someone that doesn't know me. And it was just out of the good of his heart. And I said, wow, that's extraordinary. Who was that? And he says, well, the thing is, he said that I can't disclose who that is. It was just an act of benevolence and or not even an act of generosity. It was just, that's just what happened. And that got me very curious. And only a few days later, I found out that was Dominic London. And ever since, I always saw Dominic London as like this really someone who has such a spirit of generosity. And I just want to just acknowledge you for what you did and for that gesture. And I also want you to know that when I heard that story, it actually also, it inspired me so much that I paid for someone's ticket to be there that couldn't have been there that day. So that had a ripple effect on me and on that person. So I want you to know that as well.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you sharing that and reconnecting me to that. And also you sharing that had a ripple effect on you. Some other individuals that I had been called to take action and exercise generosity and follow the nudge have also reported many things that they've done in relation to being a recipient of that at the time, and how they've paid that forward multiple times. So that's the biggest, most, I guess, heartwarming thing to hear from the whole thing.
Yeah, it's so inspiring, and it just makes you want to do more of that. And just to give purely without expecting anything in return.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, yeah, you know what comes to mind when you say that is there was no expectation at all. And it was a pure act of service, like, according to my intuition and my spirit.
Yeah.
But also, I got so much from it because my gift is in the giving.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm just being present to something, Dominic, in this conversation, just looking at my life and just realizing that in the way I was brought up, there was a lot of giving in my family. It's very, very generous. There was a lot of, I would say there's a very spirit of generosity, but every single giving, there was there was a reason for it. It wasn't just because. And I really realized how that was something that I had taken on. And whenever I was giving, it always had to come with a reason and an explanation and a justification as to why. I even, that's just something that I was so hardwired. And when I just give for no reason, just to give, it's a different quality of giving. In fact, that's actually giving. The other thing is in order to, and just seeing this more deeply, how can I live my life being someone who gives without any agenda? The way you've demonstrated for us so beautifully, Dominic. That's what I'm just really getting present to that.
Yes, it's a powerful idea and concept.
And it's, I think there's nothing like being a father where you see, the love, the care, what you give for your child is just completely unconditional, and it comes with it just comes with no agenda. In those relationships, it's easier for me to see. Yet in others, I'm seeing that's a blind spot for me. And it's not just giving financially; it's giving our time, giving our presence, giving our care. Feeling like, I'm a 15-month-old son, Oliver. One of the things that has happened is, shifting from being a married couple with my wife, Christina, and becoming a father. A lot of our conversations have been a bit around, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And every time I ask that question, can you help me? It's almost like, can you give me something? Or shall I give you something? And this whole, can you help me? It was just becoming, it just felt like there was a lot of taking and a lot of neediness. And I noticed that, even like my wife and I were getting a little snappy at each other and feeling like our needs are not being met, and each of us are just giving so much. And when we drop the whole giving and just supporting each other, just shifting from how can we be supportive? How can we have a supportive environment? How can we create a supportive network for us both? We actually started to just completely move away from the giving and just looked at our relationship as supporting each other. And we realized that, man, it's been tough. It's like we've been in Switzerland for the first 14 months, and that's the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, Matt, Christina and I, we were at the village, and we realized that we just didn't have the level of support that we wanted, feeling very isolated. and just finding it really tough, raising a child on top of everything going on. And so, yeah, I'm now speaking to you from Guatemala. We have decided to come here for the winter and with our whole family. And my whole body has just been feeling so relaxed. And what I've really discovered is just the ability to just also receive and being taken care of, and feeling like I've been the caretaker for this whole time for Christina, for my son, and just feeling like it's also just allowing myself just to receive all the help and the support. And, we have a village here, and it's so beautiful. So I just wanted to share that because it's just what's really present in my heart in this conversation right now.
No, I appreciate this share. I was just being with it.
How does that look like in your family? The giving, the taking. How does that? What is it like? How does that look like in your marriage?
The first thing that comes to mind is the idea of expectations. And I'm not sure how much it's related, but it's what's present for me after just being with the story that you were sharing as it relates to giving versus supporting and helping. And for me, it looks like expressing one's truth and being honest about one's needs, and being open to the possibility that your partner may not actually be able to honor or support those needs. And that for me is what I've learned of most recent.
Yeah. And I really appreciate what you're bringing there in the word honesty and expressing it in an honest way. And what is it that you've discovered in your relationship when you're really able to do that and create and express things in an honest way and not be living in expectations? And really being for each other? What does that look like for you?
Well, for me personally, what that looks like is I kind of opened multiple folders for me. So one of them is actually first analyzing what my needs are prior to making a request or an invitation to my wife. And what that helps me realize is where it's actually coming from. And is it something that I want from a selfish point of view, or is it something that I want that's in service of my wife and our marriage? But there was a deeper layer to that, and that was the fact that I realized of recent, my wife and I have felt disconnected. And then I realized that actually there's nothing my wife needs to do. There's nothing that she actually can do in order for me to choose who I need to be to love her fully, serve her fully. And through that love and through that service, the connection that I thought I needed is there constantly.
That's profound.
A choice on my part.
It's a choice of dropping the expectation of her needing to be any different or behaving differently than she is right now in any given moment.
Absolutely. And under that, the light of that totally, for me, shines a light on my judgments I have about my wife, my secret.
Oh yeah.
My wife, right?
Oh my God, so much. In absolute state of non-resistance and acceptance.
Yeah.
And then being able to deal with it in a way that's just effective and not, and in a way that's connected, even if there's, that where you can be connected.
Right.
I love that. This has been also just one of, just so, and I find that so inspiring, and at the same time, such a challenge at times. And this morning, this is just fresh, like at 5 o'clock this morning. So usually our son wakes up at 6, and this morning at 5, he's awake. My wife is like, can you like take him out for a walk? So I usually take him for a walk at 6, and it was 5. And this morning I was just really didn't want to do it and just wanted to stay in bed. And so I said to her, I was in my half sleep. I said, "Oh, I'll take him at 5:30," and I kind of negotiated with her, and I said, "Can you take him till then?" And she didn't feel supported, and she took him at 5:30. She came over and gave him to me, and we were kind of bickering this morning. And she was like, "Yeah, I didn't appreciate that. I didn't feel supported," and I realized that just in what you said, it's like, was this about my needs, or was it about the greater good for the family? And just seeing that, just making a clear commitment to who I want to be, and the that just seeing it's really for, like, my rest is important for the good of our whole family, and that there are a lot of things I had going on today, and if I'm not well and rested, that I really needed that extra half an hour. Yeah, and then just making a request. So this morning, I just realized, like, behind every complaint is just a need that hasn't been expressed. And so I said to her, "Hey, I'd like to make a request. I'll take Oliver at 5:30 in the morning, but before 5:30, please let me sleep." And I explained why, and I asked her if that would be if that was supportive. And she then apologized and realized that she herself was just exhausted and had a rough night. But what happened in that conversation is we came back just to a place of connection and compassion and care and supportive. And then she was like, "And I'm tired of you putting all your shit everywhere. And when you wake up in the morning, why does it take you so long to just find your shoes?" And as she was like complaining towards me, I was like, "Hey, do you want to make a request?" She's like, "Yes, I do." I was like, "All right, what's your request?" "Well, I request that you have everything prepared the night before, so that when you wake up, you can prepare. You have things ready." And then I was like, "Yeah, I can do that. I can do that. I'm gonna take that on." And so it just became an agreement. And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I'm gonna prepare everything so in the morning I can be a lot more effective, and I'm not running around looking for my keys." And so it's just such a simple thing, but it's so powerful, because when you shift from just having unmet expectations, or you're just setting yourself up for disappointment over and over and over again. And what you're saying here is just so simple, and it's such a beautiful reminder for me in the way I want to create in all my relationships.
Absolutely.
How does that play out with your kids?
More specifically, what do you mean?
Yeah, like what would be, when you say you want to, look at your own needs, look at the expectations that you have in the way that you relate to your kids. And remind me, how old are your kids?
So my oldest boy is 16. My girl, my middle is 15, and my youngest boy is 7.
Okay, so you got 2 teenagers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of parents are dealing with rebellious teenagers, and they're starting to have a mind of their own, and so I'm curious, how does Dominic London approach fatherhood with 2 teenagers in the house? Like, and how are you creating agreements with them, and what have you discovered? What's working for you? What's not working?
It's funny, because one of the biggest challenges I've had in this whole journey as a father of teenagers is actually an issue of unexpressed expectations with my oldest son. And so I can speak to that, and there'll be so much data in that, I'm sure. So, for example, I could have answered that maybe 4 months ago differently, but where we're at now is my eldest son doesn't actually live at home anymore. He's only 16. So what I realized was that I wasn't doing a great job of connecting with my truth and having the courage to share that with my eldest son. And what that led to was a massive disconnect between me and my eldest son. and eventually led to him making a decision to move in with his nan, my mother-in-law, and she only lives a mile away, so he's not far, and that was all that all, in my opinion, came about from the expectations I had of him that he was unaware of, and my lack of, I wouldn't say lack of, but my lack of courage in connecting with the truth of why I was holding back as it relates to cultivating a more deeper connection with my son, which was more aligned with how I anticipated, because I have these ideas and these judgments that, I'm not going to have that. I'm not creating that reality of a cliche. He's just a teenager. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. And actually being experiencing that. But what was most profound for me was the small hidden judgments that I had and the fear I had in expressing those to him.
Can you give me an example of one of those hidden judgments that you were afraid to express?
So, for example, our relationship was, we weren't as connected, and he's got his first love of his life, and we live in Southeast London. His girlfriend that he met at the Brit School, which is a performing arts school, she lives in Finchley, which is like an hour and 15 minutes away via London transport. And so it got to the stage where he was staying out later, and then I was creating an agreement with him. So, for example, he was at that teenage stage where he's like, why? But why? But why? But why? And so I was very mindful that I wanted to give the reasons why, because one of the things I realized that the reason I didn't want to give a why as a parent is because actually I hadn't spent much time thinking about it. And when I connected to the real why, it wouldn't be great sharing that with my children. Right?
Well,
So,
what is the real why that wouldn't be great to share?
well, exactly. I mean, I can't think of anything now, but this may, I think where we're going will kind of shine a light on one of those real points. And I think, because oftentimes it sounds childish, or you realize that you're creating an idea or a reality that doesn't exist. You're just creating it as that based on your past experiences or based on what your mother and father may have, done with you. So, for example, when my son's like, why do I have to not play computer anymore? And I'm like, Now, when I start processing this, I'm like, well, because you need to do your homework, and spending time on the game isn't spending too much time on the game isn't good for your mind. And, start connecting to all these ideas I have as to why. And then if you share them with teenagers, the amazing thing is that they actually can pull up studies and start getting in a debate with you to actually prove that that's just a theory and there's no facts in this thing, right? So you end up in any. It's like, oh, Dad, actually, here's a study done by like the University of blah, blah, and it says actually playing game has been linked to more creativity and a higher IQ. And it's like, oh, what do I say to that? So they just start getting into a dialogue. It's kind of like we realize, oh, this is going to be a debate that I'm equipped for. And actually, I learned a lot in learning to let go and learning to be at peace with kind of what is. But kind of back to where I was originally going, if that even shares an example, but that's a minor example, or one that comes to mind is, so my son started coming back later and later. Now he's 16 years old, and traveling across London at certain times of the evening is not regarded as, the safest thing to do as a minor. And so he started pushing the limits. I said, look, son, I expect you back home for 10 p.m. on a school night. And that is so fair compared to, what the average parent would allow their child to be at. And he said, why? And I said, well, because I struggle to sleep when you're not in the house. Your mom struggles to sleep when you're not in the house. And, we worry about you. We worry about you. And when you come in, you might wake up your sister, or you might disturb the household, and we feel it's not fair on the house. So that's why it would be really appreciative if you could honor the agreement, and you can see that, that's why. And so he says, yeah, sure. All right, I get it. But a few weeks pass, and he comes in later, and he comes in later, and he comes in later. And now when I talk about being honest with self, and sometimes it's almost embarrassing. Now, when I connect to, well, why is that an issue for me? Well, it's an issue because it hurts my heart, the fact that my son's not honoring an agreement with me. It makes me feel like he doesn't care about me. It makes me feel like he doesn't respect me.
It becomes very personal.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It becomes personal. And the idea of communicating some of those things with him is like, oh, I don't want him to know that. And I don't want, and then all these other creations come up. He's going to realize maybe he has a power that he doesn't know he has yet. And actually, I think the deeper truth and the deeper fear was realizing that, well, actually, nobody can tell me what to do anymore. Now I could actually do what I want and there's no real consequence. And the fear of who would my son choose to be if he realizes this veil that we've tried to create, that you listen to what your mum and dad says, otherwise there'll be consequences. And in actual fact, there aren't any tangible consequences that he can see. And then will that lead to him disrespecting us? Will that lead to him making choices that are going to impact his life negatively? And you just really, for me, this whole process and what I've gone through with my son has really shone the light on a being that exists that is like uncomfortable to admit,
Thank you for that. Was a very vulnerable share. So, thank you for saying that. I really feel your care for your son and how you really want the best for him. And I'm also hearing in your story, there's a question that comes to me, and it's like, if I don't have power and control, will my son still want to hang out with me?
Yeah. And I think for me, so what happened was how he actually decided to move out of the house it was like the fifth time. And I had come home.
Fifth time that there's like a broken agreement.
Yeah, well, maybe more than that. But what it was is that I was very frustrated with and this is what was needing. And at this time, so it was really peak in my disconnect with my wife. And we just went into the absolute most loving beings in this world, and we ignored each other for a week. So we was in this like ignoring each other for a week, like, right, well, you all right, that's that, all right. I mean, and obviously the children are in the middle of this, but if I take control in my house, or if I'm the point of contact for the agreement, I find that what my children would do, like most children would do, is, I'll go to mum. So rather than coming back to dad and renegotiating the agreement, if I go to mum, who's a little more lenient, and I guess her and dad are even in contact, I can create an agreement with mum that somehow overrides the original agreement I had with dad. And so I was experiencing this all at a time when me and my wife was really not seeing eye to eye.
Yeah.
And then I was coming back late. I was really just like throwing myself into work. And so I was like, I'll utilize this time as an excuse not to be present at home. So I'm just going to, do some admin and push myself and make some money, bury myself in work. And so I'd come home on, I think it was a Friday. It was a Friday actually. And this is after a few times I had been frustrated. See, I didn't express this, but I was frustrated that like my son now was dealing with my wife and my wife was not communicating with me. And it just felt so distracted. So when I went home on the Friday, it was midnight. And so I went in the house and I came in with a rather disruptive energy because I've created all these judgments and expectations. And I'm like, where's my son? And my wife's kind of like, oh, he's not here. And I'm like, okay. So I phoned him. I said, hey, son, where are you? And he's like, I'm on the bus. And I'm like, yeah, I can hear you on the bus, but where are you? What's your ETA? He said, oh, it's 1:20 a.m. And I just hung up on him. I was so livid. And I went and sat in the bedroom and I messaged him and I said, son, he messaged me and he said, I'm sorry, there was bus diversions, etc., etc. And I said, listen, so I was sitting there and I'm furious because I'm thinking, oh, really, there's nothing I can do or say anymore to control this kid. And it goes back to that fear that you kind of picked up on or at least something you saw in that. And so I said to him, well, I made the decision, you're not coming home tonight. So you're not coming back home at that time. You're not walking through this door at home at 1:20 a.m. And so I said, you can go to your nan's house. So he said, all right, no problem. And so I proceeded to message him and say, And then he said, I'll message you when I get to Nan's house. And in my being at that moment in time, I'm being angry. I'm being frustrated. I'm being that, you know what, this is unfair. So I messaged him and I said to him, son, don't bother messaging me when you get to Nan's house. Because one, I'm going to sleep in. And for two, if anything happens to you, there is nothing I can do about it because you've chosen to be out of reach. So I trust you'll get to Nan safely. And that was that. So clearly you can even hear in the energy of the message where I was at that particular moment in this exchange. And so the next day he woke up and he messaged us and he said, oh, I think I'm going to stay at Nan's house. And then because my wife and I was in such discord, she went into straight blame mode, and then it created more confusion in the house. And this is just a real life story and a real life exploration. And what it kind of brings me to is this point. See, when I was pondering on what was creating that disconnect between me and my son, it was the fact that I felt like, why doesn't my son want to spend time with me? Why doesn't my son admire me like I thought he would? Why doesn't he care enough to honor our agreements, you know? And I actually was aware of an inner dialogue that was kind of very I was like, I know I'm not going to ask him to connect with him because I'm his dad and he should want to connect with me. And you know, I feel like he should want to connect with me. And actually, when I dug deeper, there was a fear of rejection. Like, what if I go to my son and say, son, I miss you. I want to spend time with you. I want to rekindle our relationship. And he says, no, I'm not interested, Dad.
Yeah, and it would be the most vulnerable and emotionally intimate thing to do.
Yes.
And yet the scariest in some way.
Well, for me, it definitely was the scariest. And really what I realized was, you know, kind of, oh, we're here again. You know, I think one of the things that fascinates me about, you know, my journey as it relates to personal mastery and, you know, even since being introduced to being is that like it is a moment to moment thing. And the moment that I feel or I create the illusion that I've surpassed this.
Like
this thing.
I have achieved mastery.
Yeah, you know, I don't fear betrayal anymore, and then there's something that happens in life that will have that roundabout come right around and go, "Hello, Mr. London, how are we today?" And you're like, but you know what? The most amazing thing was born from that was that I learned so much about myself, and you know, I reconnected with my son. You know, we went out for the weekend, and I had the most amazing heart to heart where I shared so openly and so vulnerably, and I was nervous sharing because I was just worried that his idea of who I am is going to change. And I was sharing with him that I'm 37 years young and I'm just a big kid. And you might see me as your dad, or you might have ideas of who I am or who I've pretended to be to kind of mold you a certain way. But son, I'm vulnerable. I'm scared. I'm scared to even have this conversation with you. But I love you so much. And I don't ever want you to, you know, think that I don't. And I could learn a lot in regards to how I show up towards you, how open I am to you. And it just led to the most amazing, powerful, open, vulnerable conversation between father and son, you know, and he's decided he's still going to stay at his nan's. And you know what the sad truth is, or kind of hurts my heart, is that actually it's working better without him in the house.
Yeah, well, that's, and in a way, that's only a problem when you have an expectation that it should be different.
Exactly. I think there is the worries of what are other people going to think, and start.
And then I can imagine the judgments coming up, like, oh, have I failed as a father if I'm not being a first pick? And so you know, I want to really just acknowledge the vulnerability that you shared in that story, how you also just made it real for us. And a lot of the times, you know, when we're speaking to just conversations with people that are very, very successful and at the top of their games, it's rare that they will open up in the way that you have and just really invited us to see what it's like to, what really goes on in your house and what you've been dealing with and how you've went from being frustrated and pissed off and fearful to to just being really graceful in it. That takes courage. It takes heart, and that to me is inspiring. And you are, being an example for your son. So thank you for sharing that story. I'm moved by the way you shared it.
No, thank you for noticing, and thank you for creating it that way. I appreciate that.
So before we complete this conversation, I did say I was just going to come back to Birmingham and the ultimate experience in Birmingham that's happening next year. Can you share a little bit more about what that is? Who's it for? What's it, and what's going on?
Sure. I mean, it's funny because the whole TUB24 and the event and who's it's for and what's going on.
Just slow down. You said TUBE24. For those of people who've never heard that before, what is that?
So TU, the Ultimate Experience Birmingham, there are some events that have been born and inspired by Steve Hardison, the ultimate coach, the coach of being. The original one was Judy Pearson in Arizona, and then Matt Smith caught a vision to create an Ultimate Experience event, which is an event based on being and experiencing the magnificence of who you are, in my words. And now there was one that has taken place in India, and now there's another one scheduled, a being event, which is an event and an invitation to individuals to experience, not to know intellectually, but to experience the power of being and the magnificence of who they truly be. And there's another event coming up, and Matt Evans caught a vision, and he just spoke that into the world, and it's in creation as we speak.
And it's a very bold vision, and a stadium of up to 1,500 people, bringing people from all over. Where can people go to find out more about that, or purchase a ticket?
Sure thing. So it will be the 25th and the 26th of May next year. And my recommendation is to go direct to the website, which is TU Tango Uniform BE 24.com. And everything they could want to know, any links they may need, is all available on the website. Yeah, the vision is massive. The vision is big. And also, like every other being event, nobody is being paid to be there. Everybody that's part of creating this event, the amazing speakers, the amazing individuals that are, working as part of the team to create this event, everyone is investing their time for free. And one of the visions is also to raise £100,000 for a special charity, which is special to Matt Evans, as it relates to the Birmingham Children's Hospital. And there's a department that install cochlear implants, and Matt's wonderful daughter was actually a recipient as she was born deaf, and they perform these procedures where they gift hearing to children. And so one of the aims of this event is to actually raise 100,000 and gift it to this amazing charity.
What a great cause. What a great event. Thank you for sharing that. And for those that want to connect with you, know more about you and what you're up to, what's the best way they can do that?
Sure. So at current, just if you're on Facebook, just look me up under my name, Dominic London. Add me as a friend, message me, or on Instagram at Life Coach Dom. Yeah, follow me there, reach out. I'd love to connect.
Well, beautiful. Thank you, Dominic. Thank you so much for this conversation. Is there anything you want to share before we complete today?
Just my gratitude for you, the invitation to this space, my gratitude for the conversation we've just had. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Just deeply grateful for you and anyone that may listen to this podcast. And I would invite anybody that does listen to this to listen to it with their heart and open listening, and be open to being inspired are experiencing, seeing themselves in a different way.
Dominic London, thank you so much.
Thank you, Philippe. My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today. If there's someone you know who could benefit from this conversation, please share this episode with them. Your recommendation might just be the encouragement someone needs. Also, check out www.beingmovement.com. That's being movement spelled all together. You'll find real valuable resources and links to connect to an engaging and just a wonderfully supportive community. Together, we can inspire and support each other on the path to a greater understanding of being. Until next time, take care and be kind to yourself.